Hello and welcome back to Continual. Tonight we're going to be talking about Sherlockian mysteries. And I am here. I am going to be Jim Nettles, and I am your host for the evening. So first of all, I'm going to go around and have my panelists introduce themselves. Jenny, why don't you go first?
Okay, I'm Gini Koch. I write the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series for Dog Books. And I also write under pen names GJ Koch, JC Koch, Anita Ensall, Gemma Chase, and AE Stanton. And I write in all lengths, all genres, because that's why I have so many pen names, and my controlled schizophrenia works well for me. And I love mysteries, and I write more mysteries than people realize I write. Wahaha.
Lex?
Hi, I'm Alexandra Christian. I am a writer of contemporary and paranormal romance, mostly paranormal, and occasionally I dabble in horror and mystery. And I've written several Sherlock Holmes stories, and I have edited 2 Sherlock Holmes anthologies that are paranormal Sherlock Holmes mysteries. And yeah, that's me.
Nicole?
I am Nicole Gibbons-Kurtz, and I am the owner of Mocha Memoirs Press, the publisher of those 2 Sherlock Holmes paranormal anthologies for which Alexandra Christian edited. I am also a science fiction mystery writer. I also write just plain mysteries. I write futuristic noir and weird westerns.
So let's sort of kick things off a little bit. And Sherlock Holmes was one of my earliest influences. I mean, I have loved every incarnation of Sherlock Holmes. I have read all of the stories multiple times. I've pretty much seen every TV and film incarnation there is. So let's start with who kind of is your biggest influence? Who is your Sherlock, and what are the elements from that particular Sherlock that really appeal to you? So Jenny, I'm going to start with you.
It's a hard one.
Okay, well, I like you. I grew up reading mysteries, and I was reading the complete Sherlock Holmes at like 7, so I loved that. And in my mind, the Sherlock in my mind is number 1. If we're talking about a screen adaptation, Jeremy Brett, hands down, just captures Sherlock the best to me. And I think Jude Law from the Robert Downey, the steampunk versions, is Watson. Watson is a ladies' man. He's good looking. He's a man of action. And I really think Jude Law captures that incredibly well. So that's my best Watson. That's my best Sherlock. In terms of tone, I think the Jeremy Brett series has been the most faithful to what Doyle wrote. But that doesn't mean that the others aren't enjoyable. I love the heck out of the Robert Downey Jr. versions. And I love a lot of the we're not Sherlock, but yes, we are Sherlock, like Psych. Sean is absolutely doing Sherlock and Gus is doing Watson. Just zany, and and Monk is doing a form of Sherlock, or Poirot, and Poirot is a form of Sherlock. So really, I feel like if you've got anybody who is hyper aware and paying a lot of attention to hyper details that other people are missing, that is Sherlockian, whether that is a man, woman, cat, mouse, Basil the Great Mouse Detective. I must give a shout out to both the books and the Disney movie, which are very, very good. The movie was one of our daughter's favorites, so I literally have it memorized because we watched it so much. So Basil of Baker Street, big thumbs up. Great, great Sherlock. So,
what about you, Lex?
Well, my father was he was a Sherlock Holmes fan. So we had that in my house growing up, almost from birth. And it's really kind of funny. His entire family are big mystery people. My grandmother and my aunts introduced me to Agatha Christie as soon as I could read. So yeah, mysteries were a big part of my childhood. probably my first favorite Sherlock was Nicholas Rowe in Young Sherlock Holmes, which is a movie that I absolutely adore. Nicole, on the other hand, does not understand my love for that movie.
I love that movie. I'm so with you, Nicole.
Oh my God, I love it. It's like one of my favorites. It's one of my favorite movies anyway, but it's just, it's like Sherlock Holmes meets the Goonies. I love it. I also love the element that you think it's supernatural until you find out it's not supernatural. And that movie really, really does a lot with that. Plus, I was obsessed with Egyptian stuff at that time when I saw that movie first. But I'm sorry, my absolute favorite Sherlock Holmes is BBC Sherlock, and for so many reasons. And whenever I write Sherlock, it's always in Benedict Cumberbatch's voice. And you can probably read my books and hear that. In fact, I got a review of that on Chasing the Dragon, and they were like, this is totally like BBC Sherlock. And I was like, yeah, it kind of is. But that I love so many different incarnations of Sherlock. If anybody has seen Mr. Holmes with Ian McKellen, I think Ian McKellen's an excellent Sherlock Holmes.
Yes.
Playing an old Sherlock Holmes. I really love that one. And as far as iterations that aren't Sherlock, but they really are, House is amazing. And the stupid thing is, I never realized that he was a Sherlock until somebody said, oh yeah, he's a Sherlock, and Robert Sean Leonard's character is his Watson. And I was like, oh my God, you're right.
Yeah.
What a dope I am. But yeah, I love
a cute
that
dope.
show. Thanks. But I don't think that there's any versions of Sherlock that I absolutely hate. I like, my husband is a big Jeremy Brett person. So we've seen all of those. My dad loved just because that's what he saw when he was a kid. He loved the Basil Rathbone movies. The only thing I hate about the Basil Rathbone movies is his Watson. I hate
Nigel Bruce is awful.
Yes, I hate the Nigel Bruce Watson. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of people think that Watson is. And so when they go and read the stories, the original stories, they're really surprised. And I'm like, Watson was not stupid, nor was he fat and clumsy. He
was awesome.
Anyway, he was awesome. I'm sorry, I've talked too much. Go ahead.
You do not. This is your passion. I know how you feel about Sherlock, right?
Yeah.
What about you, Nicole?
So my favorite Sherlock is probably Jeremy Brett. But my favorite, I don't know why I'm on this panel. I'm not a big Sherlock person. I'm a Watson fan. And Alexandra knows this. I'm a big fan of Watson. Watson is the one who makes Sherlock, because without him, he wouldn't be able to human or people very well. And so he wouldn't be very successful. And I feel like Martin Freeman's depiction of Watson, I absolutely adore, because it's both flawed and beautiful and a perfect juxtaposition against Sherlock, but he has his own issues. I also like Guy Ritchie's version of Sherlock Holmes with Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law. Jude Law's Watson is also Jude Law's Watson is also, but it's because it's a Guy Ritchie film, and I'm a big fan of Guy Ritchie films. That's how they usually flow. And so I was really excited to see what they would do with Sherlock Holmes. And they made it. Guy Ritchie made it less stuffy, right? Yeah. And I thought it was Benedict Cumberbatch's Sherlock isn't stuffy either, but he didn't have as much, I don't want to say neuroses as Cumberbatch's Sherlock. And so I definitely love, Jeremy Brett's going to always probably be my favorite Sherlock, because those are the things I watch first. But it's almost like your first Doctor, right? It's always going to be David Tennant for me. But I definitely am not a huge fan of Sherlock. I'm a huge fan of Watson and what he does and how he behaves and how he normalizes, and I use that term loosely, Sherlock's behavior. He grounds him and he helps him human. And I think that's what makes the relationship work. I think that's what makes it interesting. Because remember, it's Watson who's penning all the stories, right? So without that, if you think about House, if you think about Psych, if you think about any of those other Sherlocks that aren't, their partner is the one who grounds them. Their partner is the one who helps them people. And that makes them palatable to the reader or the viewer.
I forgot to mention Elementary. No, we're both talking. Go.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
No, we both started. I was just going to say, I forgot to mention Elementary and how much I love Johnny Lee Miller as Holmes and how much I adore Lucy Liu as Watson. So love that as well. Go Lex.
Yeah. I like Lucy Liu as Watson. I'm not a huge fan of Johnny Lee Miller as Sherlock, and I don't know what that is about. I'm not really sure. I can't really put my finger on what I don't like.
I love him, but I don't like Benny Batch as Holmes at all. I hate the BBC series. I don't like it at all. I like Martin Freeman,
I absolutely hate Elementary.
Right.
But, I mean, the reason I don't like Elementary though is because I feel like they tried to turn Sherlock Holmes into a procedural for American audiences. And Sherlock Holmes for me is not a police procedural.
He's not.
But it's like they have that same flow, you know what I mean?
Oh, it absolutely does.
I mean,
you're right.
A lot of people absolutely love it.
I love it.
And I think I tried it and I couldn't. Well, I think I probably tried it at the wrong time because I started trying to watch Elementary while I was watching BBC Sherlock for the first time. And it's like I had really gotten used to that style of storytelling. And so when I saw Elementary the first time, it was really jarring. So that could probably be.
I started with Elementary and then I tried the BBC Sherlock, and I like police procedurals. So I enjoy that mashup of taking Sherlock and putting him in. How would he work in modern day in New York? I really like that. But I agree with you. It's definitely, it puts Sherlock into a police procedural situation, which I enjoy, and I don't like the BBC show.
I love police procedurals, but I didn't like it with Sherlock. And so I think it's because for me, Sherlock is a very different. It would be like taking Nero Wolfe and trying to make it a procedural. It's just not, that's not his vein. That's not his style. That's not who Nero Wolfe or Archie, that's not who they are. And if you think about Nero Wolfe, he's also Sherlockian in the sense that he's this brilliant genius, right? And Archie is his, is his humanizer, right? Archie is his communicator and helps him people. It also helps himself,
have you seen the Law and Order UK?
I have.
They actually is a Law and Order UK. And I had the same problem with that because it's like they were taking on a very American style of storytelling and then applying it to British culture, which to me just didn't work. So I found myself watching it and I was like, what the hell did I just watch?
So when I watch it doesn't work. It just
let me actually steer a little bit towards that question. Because we know that Watson is really our narrator. Watson is the one documenting it. So we're seeing the story. We're seeing the view of our Sherlock through his eyes. He is our narrator coming into the story. And as we look at that, and I want to compare the Johnny Lee Miller to the Benedict Cumberbatch, because they both came out basically the same time. But look at how they presented them. You have Benedict Cumberbatch who comes out and he's like, yes, I am a high functioning sociopath. Who is strong and powered in the neuroses. He knows where he's at and he doesn't care. Versus if we look at Johnny Lee Miller, this is really told more from an addict story, where it's looking at them from different positions. But if we also look at their Watsons and the viewpoint that they're coming at that from, because I think this is one of the things that really tells a lot of the differences in how we see and perceive the stories, is which Watson are we getting as the narrator? If we look at the Jude Law, looking at the steampunk version with Robert Downey Jr., the Jude Law version is the active warrior. He's the soldier from the period of time, and he's looking at a Sherlock who is active. He's physical. He's combative, but he's also very observant. And we see much of the same sort of thing with Benedict Cumberbatch. When we look at Johnny Lee Miller, we're seeing him coming at it from much as in really a much further down the road broken Sherlock. So do you see, how do you, because everybody's sort of looking and talking about their favorite Watsons. He is our narrator. So how much do you think of the story is influenced because we're looking at it through Watson's eyes?
Well,
All of it.
realistically, it should be
All
all
of
of
it.
it. It should be all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I mean,
Well,
your
I mean,
Watson does, you know, go Lex.
well, in Elementary, doesn't he meet Lucy Lou's Watson because he's being treated for drug use? Isn't she like his doctor?
He's gone into rehab, and his father, who actually is present throughout the series, you meet him, I think, in season 3. And his Mycroft is there as well. And you actually get information on the mother as the series progresses. He's coming out of rehab, and Moreland Holmes has hired Lucy Liu to be Sherlock's sober companion. So for the first season, she's his sober companion, and she has damaged because why has she stopped being a surgeon to become a sober companion? She's changed careers. And we find out why and everything else. And he is not very human when she finds him. He is very I won't do that again. And she's like, right, because she's done this before. She's worked with people before. And in the course of helping him with crime, she finds a new interest, and he finds that A, she is an apt pupil for this, and B, she becomes the only person he cares about. I mean, he loves her, not romantically, but she understands him, and it's a very, very long, it's really a very wonderful relationship, and it ebbs and wanes. They get into fights just like people do. He does very Sherlock things that, she's like, that was not okay. And along that way, and Inspector Gregson, who is Inspector Gregson's from the book, the series, the books, the stories, but Chief Inspector Gregson at the NYPD is one of his connections. So he has Bell, who would be Lestrade, but is smart and not a jerk. And so he's got this like little family that comes out. So that's part of what the procedural part of it works, is that in many ways they're all helping him become a better, more real human being. I think one of the best lines is he's at an AA meeting, and it starts an episode. He says, I just wonder how I would have been if maybe I was born at a different time when things weren't quite so manic. So I was like, you mean the Middle Ages? He goes, oh no, I want some of the modern conveniences, but maybe just before it all got so loud, what would I have been like? And I thought it was a really great callback, because his Sherlock is reacting to the modern world, versus the original Sherlock does not have the distractions and constant barrage of data that the Sherlocks that are set in modern age do. So I really like that. I don't know if I answered the question, but you can tell I love this show. So well, and I kind of where I was going. Precious. Well, and I think you hit on a lot of the elements, but it's that recognition of Watson as the narrator, and realizing that we're seeing this other person through his view, because no matter what, a Watson can only understand a Sherlock to a certain level. Yeah, you're only.
But are we though? I guess my question is, but are we though? I beg to differ that because it's a show, we're actually not getting Watson's narration, right? We're getting we're not seeing like Watson's, not like it will be in the stories where the only limited view we would get of Sherlock would be what Watson sees and observes and overhears, or what Sherlock says to him. Whereas with the TV shows, we get to see Sherlock when Watson isn't with him. And so, and hear his behavior and watch his behavior and see the stuff he does. So I'm not exactly 100% sold that it's through Watson's eyes per se. So because it isn't, it's not.
Well, I think in some respects it is, in some respects it's not. That's one of the things that I do like about the BBC show is it does have the textual element to it. Watson is recording all of his adventures with Sherlock for his blog as part of his therapy.
On the blog, right.
And it even, I mean, even though they kind of get away from it because, I mean, let's be honest, having him read his blog at the end of every show would just be stupid. Nobody would want to watch that. Yeah. But like even after he meets Mary, and Mary is going back and she's reading the blog and she's reading what Watson has to say about him. So it calls back to that. And I think they kind of do it in a clever way, because if you notice in probably the first 2 episodes of BBC Sherlock, which I always use that as an example because I've watched them so many times, Watson is markedly different. The way Sherlock is markedly different.
Yes,
and it progresses the more Watson knows him. At the very beginning, he's unsure of him. Right. By the end of the first episode, he idolizes him.
And he's ready to kill someone for him. No, I agree. Yep.
Right. As it goes through the second episode, he completely idolizes Sherlock. By the third episode, he's starting to see the cracks. He's starting to see where he is not very good at peopling. He is not, he is too disconnected. And, one of my favorite scenes in any of the show at all is it's in the last episode of the first series, and they're talking about, it's the thing where they have the timed mysteries and the people are going to be blown up if they don't. And all Sherlock seems to be interested in is solving the mystery. And Watson's like, you do realize that this person's going to die, right? And he's like, well, why should I care, And Watson is completely flabbergasted by that. He's just shocked, and then that colors how he perceives Sherlock going forward after that. And you see he starts standing up to Sherlock after that as well. Hey, this is not good. You need to remember that there are people involved, and that goes through the rest of the seasons, in my opinion.
So let's now we've kind of got a good baseline of who our Sherlock is. I mean, if I go back and look, my first Sherlock was actually Basil Rathbone. I am a huge Jeremy Brett fan, but all of them to me have their real characteristics and things that I love and things that I don't necessarily like, but all of them have things that appeal, and even the things that are Sherlockian. So when we look at your work, when you're developing something, let's actually start with, if you're putting something in a Sherlockian universe, even if your characters are not Sherlock and Watson, you're not facing off against Moriarty, what are the kinds of elements that you think are critical to that Sherlockian style of mystery? So Nicole, I'm gonna start with you.
Sure. What Gini said earlier was the hyper awareness of something, right? They have to be, like I mentioned Nero Wolfe earlier. Nero Wolfe is he never leaves his house or his orchids, but he's very good at picking out the details of what Archie reports or what people say. It's almost like it's an auditory, it's like auditory photographic memory, right? An auditory memory. He can remember what they tell him and what he hears, and he can pick out by just mulling those things over the flaws or the lies or the contradictory statements. And so those type of things, when I write characters that I want to be eccentric, but also genius level in what they do, they have to have one specific talent that is almost like a savant level. And then it also that would also make them awkward, like in terms of being able to connect to people, because they have this super hyper ability.
What about you, Jenny?
Well, when I write Sherlockian mystery, I'm usually writing alternate Sherlock. So I have a female Sherlock and a male Watson in present day Los Angeles. And she is very Sherlock. Okay, so she's a woman from London, lived in New York, and now is in Los Angeles. With the differences that would come with being a woman in that situation, but she is definitely the savant level. She can be charming and is willing to be charming more often than her male counterpart would be. But one of the things she loves about Watson is he's going to handle all that. He's going to like run interference for her. It's one of the reasons why they team up, and she likes him for a variety of reasons. But when I'm writing something that isn't specifically Sherlock, when I'm writing a mystery or when I'm writing something else, I use the mystery as the foundation. It's the foundation of the house, the novel that I'm building. Everything I write has a mystery of some kind in it. My characters have to figure out what's really going on. And in the Alien series, Kitty has a savantness when she needs it, because she is a keen student of popular culture, comics, and rock and roll. And she can use those things, and does, to figure something out, because she'll just go like, in the comics, this is what this guy, and it's like she can tell you which track of which song, but she can't work a maze to save her life. So she, she's in a building, it's like, her love interest, he's like, she's like naming all these albums that somebody has left her musical cues from. And no, I know that's my CD, not his CD. He's like, amazing attention to detail. Where are we in the science center? Just like, don't know. So that's where her savantness is, but she is not really, she's much more of an action hero, but she still has to figure out mysteries. Especially book 7, Alien in the House, which I literally call, that's my murder mystery novel in the series. And they quote, there's a lot of quoting of Sherlock Holmes in there as a guide kind of thing. But I think it's really what Nicole said. You have to have, if you're going anything Sherlockian, someone has to have a savant level, or at least a really high skill level in whatever you need for them to be able to solve the problem. Maybe it's math, maybe it's comics, right? Maybe it's something else, but that attention to detail in some way has to show up. I think without it, you can't even really be Sherlockian, because that's kind of the key. So I basically agree with everything Nicole said.
What about you, Lex?
Well, I think that you have to have a certain amount of disconnect from emotional intelligence, whether that is intentional on his part or unintentional on his part. You have to have that. If you don't, then your character's not going to be recognizable as a Sherlockian character. So, and that does not mean that his character cannot ever have feeling for anything else. He does, but a lot of times he has to be pulled into that. He has to be, somebody has to bring it to his attention, otherwise your character is going to kind of fall flat. Which I think is what's wrong with a lot of, what's wrong with a lot of detective stories, because somebody that is who is so attentive to detail is going to have a really hard time being a, social butterfly. That's just not how the human brain works. So I think you have to have that. I personally like to include Sherlocky quirks, like he has to be a master of disguise. He has to have some sort of way. I love the way they do it in the Robert Downey Jr. movies, where it's comic relief, but it works. That's actually a trope that has been borrowed through all kinds of various and sundry mystery things, where characters are having to solve some sort of mystery or problem or pursuit. My favorite use is in Wild Wild West. If anybody has ever seen that movie, which if you haven't, you should totally see it. when they go to the ball to see to find the villainous Dr. Lovelace. Artemis Gordon is very much you can definitely see the Sherlockian roots of Artemis Gordon, and he is a master of disguise as well. One thing is Sherlock's drug use. Now, everybody makes such a big deal about Sherlock's drug use. Conan Doyle was not making a big deal about Sherlock's drug use. Everybody used cocaine at that time. It was not a big deal at all. I think in one of the later stories, Watson mentions that Sherlock needs to lay off using the cocaine solution, but it was not this big hairy deal. However, modern culture has made this a very big deal. We have a very different view of cocaine and opium and morphine than they did in the 1860s, 70s, 80s. And so that people make a whole lot, and I do as well. I mean, in my writing as well, there's always a piece of that. He has to have some sort of vice. And I think that the purpose of that initially was to give Sherlock some sort of humanness. His vices were what made him like everybody else. And I think maybe that's what speaks to me as a writer, is putting that is giving him that little bit of imperfection. Or sometimes maybe it's just sexy to have drug addicts. I don't know.
I gave mine. I didn't want to even touch the drug stuff. So my female Sherlock, she is addicted to reality television, which I think is probably way more detrimental than heroin.
That's way more harmful.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and
she feels she's learning, and she is. She actually learns a lot about human nature from it because of what goes on.
And I think BBC Sherlock, when they started out, the addiction that he's a recovering smoker. He was trying to quit smoking. And I think that they kind of bowed to fan pressure a lot by giving him more of a drug problem than he had initially. They mentioned that he had a drug problem in the past in like the first season. But then, I don't think that they intended to make his drug use as big of a deal as it became by the third and fourth seasons.
Now, when you look at Sherlock, you've got to have a complex mystery, because if you're going to have somebody who's paying attention to every nth level of detail, when you're going in and looking at that part of the mystery, the critical part here is to have a good antagonist that you're going to be balancing Sherlock against, because you can't put Sherlock against, the average dime store thief, or, okay, it was the butler that did it. He's going to walk in and go, butler did it, and walk back out. So you've got to have that good antagonist to work the mystery against. I mean, we all know Moriarty, and as Moriarty is one of my favorite, antagonists of all time. Irene Adler, is while not exactly an antagonist, is definitely an entanglement, no matter which way you see her. So from an antagonist standpoint, how do you work your antagonists so you have somebody who's a good balance to your Sherlock?
They're a foil, right? So it's the same thing you see in Harry Potter. And initially, the first books, you see Draco as Harry's foil. He is the exact opposite of everything that Harry is, right? And so he's his foil. But as the story evolves, you learn that Voldemort is actually Harry's foil. Meaning they have the same situations, but very different results. You see the same thing happen in Black Panther with Killmonger and T'Challa. They're both princes of Wakanda, but they are each other's foil. And so both sons of princes, but here you have this diversion or this fork in the road that brought them to two very different places. The same thing happens with Harry and Draco. The same thing happens with Sherlock and Moriarty. They're highly intelligent, but they took to doing two very different things with that talent. And so my protagonists are often Sybil's foil, or Jane's foil, or in many instances, like in my Kingdom of Ava series, the person is, or the foil is another, someone of esteem or in the same social class. it's not those birds are in lesser classes. And so for my antagonist, and my antagonist also has to believe that what they're doing is right and that they don't see themselves as a villain. They believe wholeheartedly in whatever it is they're doing as being something that is righteous or something that is great or something that is good. Even if it is, I'm stealing this money to take care of my aging mother, or I'm stealing this money to take care of my sister who is pregnant with twins. Whatever the case may be, they have to feel fundamentally, in much the same way that Killmonger does, in much the same way that Draco does. He feels like he's protecting the good name of, you know, of wizards, right? You can't let these mudbloods in here and them stain. So he literally believes, just like if you ever listen to some of the rhetoric that's out there, they actually believe that what they're saying is, you know, good. They don't see themselves as villains. And so that's how you avoid making your villain a caricature too, or a stereotype, is to humanize them. And so for my villains in my mysteries, they have whatever they're doing it for the reason that they wholeheartedly believe is fair, right, and just. It just isn't.
Right.
So.
Right.
What about you, Lex?
Well, I agree with Nicole. You have to definitely, your villain has to have many different layers. Your villain has to have a backstory that definitely makes them wholeheartedly believe in what they're doing is right. You know, I am able to make my villains interesting because mine are normally paranormal. My Watson series, he's John Watson Monster Hunter. I mean, so his villains they don't have to be human. Now they usually have interesting reasons for why they're doing what they're doing. In the first Watson book, the antagonists, I mean, they're vampires, so they do what they do, you know, and the head vampire, she's getting revenge on men. And so that's why she's created all of these vampires, to get revenge on men. Not really sure what my problem was at that point in my life when I wrote that. The second one, the villain definitely believes that men are superior to women. And so he's trying to grab that power. So, you know, there has to be a strong motivation that's viable for the villain, that the author has to know from page one. Now, the reader doesn't need to know that. And the reader doesn't need to know the villain's whole backstory, but the author definitely has to know all that, because that's what you're going to do to create a more layered character, which unfortunately is one of the things that I find to be flaws in the original books. Conan Doyle himself, writing the books, in the process of writing them, was so in love with the character of Sherlock Holmes. I mean, he based the character on a person that he himself idolized. So, you know, in doing that, he kind of neglected the layers in his villains. I mean, even Moriarty doesn't have huge layers. I mean, he has his purpose.
Well, remember,
in this. Go ahead.
His purpose is so that he can kill Sherlock off. Okay.
Right.
This is a guy trapped by his own success. The author wants to stop writing Sherlock Holmes. Look, I have all these other things. He creates Moriarty to kill Sherlock off. And then, because he has to bring him back, now you're stuck with the legacy of Moriarty. So, yeah, I agree with you. I don't think Moriarty is a very deep character, but he didn't write him for that. He wrote him so he could kill Sherlock off and write other things. Right. That no one wanted to read.
I mean, Moriarty is a great villain in the same way that the Joker is a great villain. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
He doesn't have. Why? I mean, he's just a dog chasing cars. You know,
he's a foil. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like the Joker is Batman's foil. If Batman is bringing order, then the Joker is absolutely chaos, and that's his sole purpose. Is to, that's why he's just right. So that's why he doesn't have more. Think about it.
Comes the question.
Right.
So if
Who
you,
creates
Right.
who?
well, that's always the question.
Yeah.
Like if you look at
Mhm.
Heath Ledger's Joker, he brought so much gravitas to that character. That's the only reason why the Joker's like uber popular now is because
No.
Ledger's.
No.
Oh, you can disagree, Ginny,
No.
but
Comics, you keep in mind, you were talking movies. In the
I know
comics, the
I
Joker
have the
has always,
comics. I
yeah,
am
he's
aware.
always been
And I
layered.
know
Go ahead.
that I was talking about now, not the 1960s
Yeah.
Batman that made
Oh,
the
I'm not
Joker
talking
popular.
about that
And I'm
one.
not
No. I'm
right.
talking about
Or
things
Jack
like Frank
Nicholson's
Miller.
Joker or Frank
No, I'm talking
Miller's
about things
Joker.
like
I
Frank
own
Miller's.
those comics, so
Yeah,
I'm
those,
aware.
yeah.
I'm talking
Yeah.
about the level of gravitas that Ledger brought to that character.
Yeah.
Because even if you think about the 1990s Joker with Jack Nicholson, he did a great job with the character, but it wasn't
Mhm.
Oscar worthy, is what you got with Ledger.
No.
And that's
No.
that's my point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
that level of popularity, like
People didn't
amongst this
start rooting for
movement.
people didn't start rooting for the Joker until Heath Ledger.
Ledger. Thank
I mean,
you.
that's the way I
Yeah.
would say it. That's the way I
Yeah.
would think about it. Yeah.
But I
Absolutely
wonder
think you're right,
if-
Nicole.
But I think too that's why Moriarty is also just like his whole purpose, like Jeannie said, is just to be this means to an end. He doesn't have
Mhm.
any more depth than that until
Yeah.
and he just does it. And it
We've all
works.
given him more depth. And by we, I mean like the three of us,
Yes.
everybody else who's writing.
Writers,
Everyone
yes.
else who's right. We've all given more depth than Doyle ever wanted to give him. All of
Yeah,
us
that's
have,
true.
because
That's true.
we have to make Moriarty three-dimensional. Guy Ritchie had to make him three-dimensional. The Jeremy Brett, they were putting Moriarty in earlier. Everybody had to make him more three-dimensional than Doyle ever did, because we're treating it as a canonical character, and he was just like, please let me stop.
Yeah.
Well,
I have to put this in because I'm a writer and writers love to push their own work. But so I wrote the story that I wrote for the second Sherlock anthology, because I actually did put one of my stories in the second anthology, but it's a
Good for you.
Sherlock is a robot thing, and he's being put together. Well, he's being put together by a Moriarty robot. And at the very end, it's like, well, the reason why I'm doing this is because I'm a machine. A machine has to have purpose. I have no purpose without you. And so I think that's,
I think that makes total sense. Yeah, I think that makes total sense. I mean, the ones I write, going back to Jim's question, in my Necropolis Enforcement Files series, that's my paranormal, and they're fighting. They're basically trying to stop Armageddon all the time. So it's all, like Lex was saying, you can get really great villains because they're undead and they're, all these other things. Otherwise, I just, I basically I don't have a problem coming up with villains. The issue is that you have to kill them off, and creating a good villain is really hard, and killing them off is painful. So I tend to bring them back, because they do it in the comics all the time.
Yeah,
and
I know.
So do I, right? Okay. I mean, the Joker's died a lot too, right? He still comes
right.
back.
It's like more times than I have fingers and toes. So
Yes, right?
Yeah.
Harley alone has killed him at least 5 times, right?
That's true.
At
So
least.
I
At
took it back.
multiverse theory is
So
a
I bring it
wonderful
back.
thing.
That's right. That's right. I
Yes.
literally write in a multiverse. My Alien series is firmly set in a multiverse, so I can do whatever I want,
That's cool, Jeannie.
and I do. So
Well, so we've talked about our hero, we've talked about our Sherlock and Watson and that duo,
Mhm.
and I think that's part of what's critical here is that duo that has to play off of each
Mhm.
other. They're
Mhm.
two characters that create more of a whole person than either one of them could ever be by themselves.
Mhm.
And then we look at an antagonist who has to, in some ways, be able to match, if not be superior to Sherlock. And often what we see their downfall is because they're like, I am better than Sherlock, so therefore I don't have to worry about anything. It's that antagonistic move of having to prove being that intelligent. So how do you then go create the mystery between two characters that are both struggling to prove how smart they are, how clever they are, how much attention to detail they pay, how do you go about that part of the process to create that level of mystery and that level of story?
Planning, plotting. You have to plot. I mean, you just do. I do anyway. I can't speak for any other author, but I have to plan. I have to plan it out. I have to use my beats. I have to do, it's a very intricate thing. Mysteries are hard to write. I don't know if people understand that. They're fun, but they're difficult to write because of that intricacy. So I plan a lot. I actually use my character's hubris on both sides of the coin to make them mess up, because that's what trips us up. And Jim, you mentioned that. It's that hubris that I don't need to pay attention to that. That's insignificant. That's not important. And when in some cases, those things that are traditionally not important sometimes are. And so that level of humor and arrogance and overconfidence on both sides for my villain and my protagonist can lead them to making mistakes. And so they don't always make mistakes, there's a genius level, but sometimes because of that hubris, they have a blind spot. And that's usually the thing that catches them up.
I don't plot. I'm an extreme linear writer. I know, and everyone I know that writes mysteries goes, that's, because I'm one of the only people that doesn't. And I tried it once because I'd heard that Agatha Christie always started with the last scene. So she wrote the last scene first, and I tried. Oh my God, what a clusterfuck that ended up being.
I can't do that. I can't do that. I'm very linear, but I can't. Oh my God,
I'm extremely linear. I can't literally. If I plot out the mystery, it's terrible. It's like bad, and it has to be redone. And so I am just, my brain knows what it wants to do, and it's going to tell me at the time. And then when I get there, I'm like, oh, I need to filter in some more clues in the front. And away we go. But I only know one thing for the most part when I start a novel: my protagonist is going to win. In a short story, that is not necessarily so. I kind of map those out a little better. But even so, my Sherlockian, my Sherlock, those are novella and novelette length, and didn't plot them. Can't do it. I go back and fix it, so you can't tell I didn't plot it, but I just can't write any other way. I try really hard, and it's just a waste of effort. So I just let it ride, and I fix it in post. So
what about you, Lex?
I'm kind of a mixture, because I write all these lovely outlines and I don't stick to them. I wish that Lucy Blue, who writes the Stella Hart series, I wish she was here, because she has a really fantastic way of plotting out mysteries that I wish that she would teach me, because she actually does them backwards. She's like Agatha Christie. She starts with the end scene. She knows what's going to happen in that. Now, she may not actually write the scene itself, but her outline always has the end scene first. And then she has, charts and graphs and all this other stuff. Sorry, Lucy, I'm probably giving away your trade secrets, but where she knows, okay, this clue is going to lead back to this red herring, and this clue is going to lead back to this red herring, and all that. So she's really good at that part. I am not. I usually try to have an idea of what kinds of clues there need to be along the way. And so I put those into my outline, and those parts I do stick to, but then everything else may change. But I'm also very, very linear. I can't skip around in the story. I'm trying to teach myself to do that by using Scrivener, because Scrivener does allow you to go back and forth and put things in and move things around. But so far, I'm just using Scrivener to write linearly. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I'm actually going to be interested to know how that goes for you. Keep me posted, because like you, I can't do it. I've tried. If I write a scene, I can't write to it. I can do it in editing, if my editor wants more here or less there, I can do that. But I have this great scene, and I'll sew no, No, that
Well, I'll
scene's
tell you
gonna
what.
float out there and never be seen again.
I'll tell you what I can do that with.
Mhm.
Many of my romance manuscripts have a big thing in the middle of it that says insert sex scene here, and I can write the sex scene elsewhere
same,
at another time,
same.
and I usually write sex scenes by hand, and so to speak. And so yeah, but
we're here all week.
and then go and put them back, and then go and put them in later.
Yes, I do. I do that too. I do that
but
too.
Yeah, that's the only way that I can do that. To skip around.
And I have to know. I try to make sure something in the sex scenes, because I'm writing science fiction or paranormal, whatever, with strong romantic subplot, but it's not romance first. It has, therefore, the sex scene has to do something to move the plot forward. So I have to figure out, is it the location? Is it, is it something that they're going to hear? Is it something one of them's going to say? I have to know that, or the sex scene is just sort of like, sex scene here, I have no idea what I'm doing. So, then that's just the sex scene sitting out there going, would you write me? Oh, in a minute or 2 or 50.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, it's kind of one of those things you got to be in the mood for,
Yes. Yeah.
And depending on which Sherlock as to whether or not they know what they're doing or not.
That's true.
Hey,
That's
my
true.
Sherlock knows exactly what he's doing, baby.
Yeah. All of my characters know what they're doing. Yeah. My Sherlock, should she want to, she knows what she's doing.
Yeah.
So we're getting close to wrapping up. So if you had somebody that was
Jim's like, dear God, let this be over.
So is there one thing that we haven't touched on that really cements something that is a Sherlockian mystery versus, say, any other kind of other standard mystery or police procedural or something along those lines? What's the one thing for you that we haven't talked about or touched on?
Sherlock's thought process. Sherlock's thought process has to be in the story, or it's not a Sherlockian story, in my opinion. If you don't have with the whole scene where he says, okay, well, this is what happened, and because of that, this is what happened, and then this is what happened, and I know that you did this because of this, this, and this. Until you have that whole long dialogue, it ain't a Sherlock story, in my opinion.
I can agree with that.
Yeah, I can agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Try to think if there's something else. Because I really feel like we covered it very, very well. I think the official police as supportive antagonists, like, they really hate having to call on Holmes because they really don't want to have to deal with we can handle it. The Lestrade from the books and from the Jeremy Brett, oh, we don't need you. And then once in a while they'll break down and say how much they appreciate and need him, right? So I think you kind of need that, like the people who he's assisting, not the clients, but the law enforcement who in no matter what, he's assisting them some way, shape, or form, that they are, one of them can be pro and the others are like, if I have to work with one of you, or they'll be antagonistic to Watson because they can't be antagonistic to Sherlock, but there's an antagonism from the police that ebbs and flows, but it's there. I think that, I don't know that it is necessary, but I think is it out. Nicole, it's to you now. Come up with what we haven't done.
It's all you, Nicole.
She's just like, la la la, I can't hear any of
you gotta have Mrs. Hudson or a mother-ish figure, or someone who's going to give
I agree.
the boys or the two like a home. And so,
how did we forget Mrs. Hudson?
How? Thank you. You're right. I consider that really important. You're right.
You gotta have like a Miss Hudson character.
Yeah.
So I'm going to throw one more thing on the table because I had Miss Hudson in my back pocket, but I've got one more. I've got one more to throw on the table for you. The Irregulars, his network, of all of his spies and
Mhm.
all of his people in the underground. And that connection is almost, to me, sometimes his most human connection as to how they're done and displayed, is because it's often those are the people that Holmes can connect with and have relationships with in some way, shape, or form. So any opinions there on the irregulars and how they play into the universe? And do
Well,
they play into yours?
they don't judge him. They don't judge him. And I
Right.
think that's
Mhm.
one of the reasons why he is as charitable and kind to them, is because they don't judge him like the rest of the world seems to.
Right.
But they're also an amazing plot device. I mean, all of these things that Holmes could not possibly know that he has to know. Oh, well, he got that from his underground network. If you don't have
But I
the
don't-
underground network, then a lot of his deductions are like, oh yeah, right. How did you know that?
Right. But I don't think you need the irregulars in every story. I mean, Doyle certainly didn't
No.
have them in every story.
No.
I don't think you
No.
need them there. I'm actually, one of the things I'm doing in my Sherlock is I'm starting to show how she is building her irregulars in Los Angeles, and how that's starting is it's kind of slow. I know how it's starting, and I know what's going on. So it's kind of fun for me to say, oh, now I get to build an irregulars. But I don't think you need them in every story. But I do agree that having them, like Lex said, it's just a really great way for Sherlock to know something without you having to show the reader how Sherlock figured that out. An irregular can just say, we found where that guy's hiding out, Mr. Holmes. There you go. Sherlock and Watson don't have to pound the pavement. The irregulars did it, and now we get it's a two lines instead of 20 pages.
Right.
So
Right. And if you notice, a lot of things, a lot of crime stories have characters like that. Did anybody watch Miami Vice in the 80s?
yeah. Or
Anytime Crockett and
Hutch in
Tubbs
the
couldn't
70s.
figure stuff out, they called the Noog Man.
Yeah.
How much math had to die for me to remember Noogie?
Right. I was going to say, well, Starsky and Hutch had Huggy Bear.
Huggy Bear.
So
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, if you think about like Spencer and Hawk, Spencer is Sherlockian in the sense that he is, even though he's a boxer, he's still brilliantly read and he's really great. He's like has a higher, but he has Hawk and he has Mario. And he has a whole team of other people that he's able to get. Quark, who's a Boston cop. So he has a way of getting like his information as well. So you do need that pretty much in every story, any mystery story.
Yeah,
I agree. And I wanted to give
about Hawk.
We're rewatching. Oh, how can you
It's
forget about Hawk?
Spencer
I
and
know, how
Hawk.
did I forget Hawk? What the actor who played Hawk in the 80s Spencer
is Avery
show?
Brooks.
Is Avery Brooks.
Avery
Yes.
Brooks. Oh my God, be still my heart. My sister
Yeah.
Sarah and I, we watched Spencer faithfully now my father was a big fan of the Spencer novels, and so we watched the show because of that.
Yep.
But then my sister Sarah and I, we would watch faithfully because we were both in love with Hawk.
Oh yeah, who was it? It wasn't.
I'm a big Robert B. Parker fan, so
yeah. Well, and also one of the things I've noticed, we're rewatching. We started a rewatch of NCIS because we just want to watch. We have an episode. Realized that it is Sherlockian. Gibbs is Sherlock. He doesn't relate very well to people. He relates really well to Abby, and he relates okay to Ducky, but for the most part, it's his gut. He's seeing all these things that people don't. And his team around him, DiNozzo, for the most part, is DiNozzo and Ducky. They're all taking, and Abby, they're taking different aspects of Watson, and that's what they do. But I've been really struck, and partially because we've been doing these panels, it really hit me that, oh my God, Gibbs is the Holmes character here. He has certain quirks. He has, a lot of hidden things in his past and all this other stuff. And he's very almost antisocial. And yet he's the person that always figures out what's really going on with, Tony's Archie, or, the fun, the charming part of Watson and so forth. So I think it's so, it's so permeated that I think you could drill down into anything and find a Holmesian type character in the show if you try even a little bit to spot the character ticks.
Which would just piss Conan Doyle off so bad.
I think so. Well, and then again,
he hated Sherlock Holmes so much by the end, you know.
You know what? I think if he had the distance, he might be thrilled in that sense that everybody still loves what he created so much. But and then some of his other stuff has gotten made into movies, so he might forgive us because somebody made The Lost World at some point.
Yeah.
So yeah. It's hard when you do the one.
Well, guys, I think we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up. We've been going for a little more than an hour, so and it's only been 4 of us. So if you guys want to let everybody know where to find you, website, social media, all that kind of good stuff. So Gini, I'll let you go first.
Okay, www.ginikoch.com. I am on Facebook, far too much. Twitter at Gini Koch, _. Pinterest, supposedly have Instagram, but I really never go there. And you can reach me via Messenger, Discord, email. I'm everywhere.
Lex?
Well, I do have a website. It's alexandrachristian.com, but there is a under construction tab on there right now because it's under construction. But I'm on Facebook all the time. I have my Facebook group is the Hells Bells, and we talk a lot. And I'm trying so hard to get into TikTok, but I'm so old and I'm reminded of it all the time. But if you want to join me over on TikTok, I am Lexi C. Wright. I also do Instagram and all of that stuff too.
Nicole?
You can find me at NicoleGivensKurtz.net or at MochaMemoirsPress.com. I'm also on Twitter at Nicole G. Kurtz, as well as Facebook at Nicole G. Kurtz.
And I've been Jim Nettles. You can find me at jamespnettles.com, jim-mcdonald.net, authoressentials.net, authoressentialsworkshops.com, and of course here at ConTinual, causing some sort of trouble. Thanks everybody for coming to hang out and watch with us, and we'll see you next time.